This is Coffee, Country, and Cody.
Welcome to our last show from the Magnolia Lobby Studio, historic place in the history of WSM Radio. We're closing in on 100 years, and 40 of them have been spent in this studio. And we would split time for a time in this studio as well as the Park Studio in the days of Opryland, USA. Do the morning show in here, and then a lot of times middays, afternoons, evenings would be done in the park during park hours when it was open. But we wrapped things up at 10 o'clock this morning from this historic studio, and a couple of guys who were here when it happened 40 years ago, Radio Hall of Famers, Keith Bilbrey and Kyle Cantrell. Kyle brought me to WSM in the spring of 1994.
Yeah, we're going to talk to him about that, by the way.
Who else was up for the job, I wonder?
And it'll be just because they've got so much. And I want to say good morning to Jim Driver, who is also a part of that, who's been checking in with me and interacting on social media. Jimmy Drive. And let's see. Kyle was nicknamed Clovis by Charlie Douglas, who was running the Music Country Radio Network, the reason this studio was built. Bud Wendell had the idea to start the Music Country Radio Network. And so Kyle was Clovis and Jim Driver was Wichita. Those were their character names. Kind of after Lester Moran and the Cadillac Cowboys through the Statler Brothers. That whole vibe.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're coming by to see us this morning. It's going to be fun.
How do we not have nicknames?
Because Charlie Douglas isn't here.
Yeah.
That's true.
Although, at the Opry one night, I achieved my highest honor. I didn't really think I could get this honor, but the stage crew referred to me as Common. I had achieved Common. There's another part that goes along with
that.
But,
there is.
But yeah, I thought, man, I didn't think I had that in me to be that, but I'm so glad I am. I made my day.
In the tradition of Lester Moran and the Cadillac Cowboys, we'll refer to Keith Bilbrey and Kyle Cantrell as two fine country singers, Red and Wesley,
that's right.
this morning when they get here.
Gosh.
Jim Lauderdale is coming by.
Yes.
Is our last live performer in studio before the transition. And just so you know, in case you're wondering, well, what are you doing? Well, we're going to a remote studio for a couple of weeks, and then in early July, we will be in the Acuff house, state-of-the-art facility. You'll be able to come see us, walk up the plaza, see us on the big screen outside, take the tour. It's a museum as well as a state-of-the-art radio and television studio. So
Come in and watch all of us doing our jobs. You stare at us, beat on the glass, put your handprints on it. That'll be fun.
And coming up, we're going to the Grand Ole Opry House. I was at the Ryman Bluegrass Nights last night, and you were at the Grand Ole Opry House across town. And
Don Schlitz getting a standing ovation last night, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Ann Wilson. We're going to rewind to Ann Wilson, and a song that I chose is my pick of the week. It was January the 24th this year. Rain in the Rear View, which is on the album Rebel, her brand new album that's out. And she's doing a little Q&A, sit down after
post show. Yeah, I think if you buy the new album Rebel, you get to attend in the Circle Room and do some chatting and play a few songs. It's really cool. I love those post show opportunities.
Is Aaron doing that one?
Aaron Cooper's
Aaron
doing
Cooper
that one,
on air with Aaron this afternoon. By the way, she starts at 3 o'clock. Kelly Sutton. What kind of stories we got this morning on this historic morning in WSM's history?
Well, it's a lot of pomp and circumstance. We love it all. We have a few things to talk about coming up. The best advice that Jelly Roll, Lainey Wilson, and Carly Pierce have ever received. So they
Is it all the same piece of advice?
I don't think so.
Different
I think it's a little bit different.
okay.
But yeah, so the best advice from those three. Post Malone has announced he's doing a Nashville show. He's teamed up with Bud Light, and it's called A Night in Nashville. We don't have many details on it. We know the date. We don't know where. We don't know exactly where you can get the tickets, but we're going to find out more about that. Plus, Lainey has a brand new song that's on that Twisters album. I'm looking at this soundtrack. It might be one of my new favorite movie soundtracks. I mean, everybody that we know and love is on this thing, including Riders of the Sky.
This is Coffee, Country, and Cody.
Memories of 40 years in our Magnolia Lobby studio at Gaylord, Opryland. Please welcome Kyle Cantrell and Keith Bilbrey, a couple of Radio Hall of Famers just sat down. in a
Howdy,
studio where you were here when it all started, both of you, correct?
Well, the memories are flying through my head right now.
Oh yeah, we were just walking through some of the back rooms here to take a look at what how it's changed and all that. It's really, really something to think that this place has been in existence for 40 years and how it has changed, but still very much the same.
And give us the background on how it got here, because I know Bud Wendell and Charlie Douglas were instrumental, correct?
Well, they were. This studio was the brainchild of Charlie Douglas, who, for people who don't know, came here in mid-1983 to start running the Music Country Radio Network, which had existed prior to him getting here. But he was appointed the new leader of that, and from the first day he got here, his goal was to find a place where the Music Country Network could have its own studio. At that time, we were sharing studio with WSM over on McGavock Pike, and Charlie wanted his own space. And so he got permission from Bud Wendell and went to Jack Vaughn, who was the head of the hotel here, and they carved out this little space. This was nothing more than just a sidewalk, really. And they carved out this little space and made this studio out of it.
And when do you first remember coming here, Keith?
Let's see, that was so long ago. My memory's fading. No, I remember the first night out here. I was scared to death. I mean, you had all these people looking in, and radio guys, we don't like to be seen. We like to be
How long had you been here when you came to the studio?
I don't know what year.
Well, the studio was opened in 1984.
Right.
Yeah, and I came in 74 or something.
Yeah, you'd been here for a long time by then, but we started working in this studio just for Music Country Network.
Yeah,
that's all.
that was it.
In 1984, and the only facility here was this room. Now, for folks who don't know, there's another studio back behind us there. Actually, there are two studios. One of them's not used as a studio anymore, but those rooms were added later. That whole space where that room that's got the equipment in it was a lounge for guests who would come in. And Charlie's goal on Music Country Network was to have a major country star on as a guest every night, and he did. He succeeded
pretty much
in that.
Lived up to it.
What year did you come, Kyle? Keith, you said 74 for you?
Well, I'm a youngster compared to him. I got here.
Hey. Everybody's a youngster compared to me.
Well, no, I don't mean age. I mean in terms of experience. You started working here when you were 12.
That's right. Yeah.
No, I was every bit of 20 years old, and that was in 1982.
Kelly, you got to hear this story. Keith, I had never heard this as long as I've known Keith Bilbrey. Who, by the way, the first day I was in this studio, 1994. April 25th, 1994, Kyle brought me here from KKYX in San Antonio. Keith was doing morning television weather on Channel 4. Richard Thomas was doing traffic, and Richard was monitoring you, and he goes, your boy is getting a pedicure on television. And Keith was doing a bit with a sponsor, I guess, and you were getting your nail. He said, not his fingernails, his toenails.
That's right.
And then later you came.
My feet are very ticklish, so it was a good bit.
And then I later remember the first day you walked through this studio door that's behind me here, and we met for the first time. But you have to tell your first radio station story in your hometown of Cookeville that just recognized you in the greatest way. I mean, it was a high holy day for Keith Bilbrey in Cookeville, Tennessee.
Was. Well, I started at WHUB when I was 16 years old, and they just had a Keith Bilbrey Day in Cookeville, and I was quite honored and brought all these folks back that I hadn't seen in years, and unfortunately, they didn't have name tags, so I couldn't remember their names.
But tell us about your first friend and your first radio station.
Well, I was a radio nut from a very young age. I don't know why, but that was my chosen field. I wanted to be on the radio someday. And I think I was 12 years old, and there was this little unit you could get that would actually broadcast over an AM radio, very, short distance. But I got this thing, and my friend Chuck Allen now owns Athlon Sports. He's done well. He got into something he could really make money at. But he was my field tester, and we'd see how far we were getting out that day. He'd go out on his bicycle with a little transistor radio, And so I thought, well, what we need is a better antenna. So I first hooked it up to the gutters in the house, and that got it out a little bit. Okay, let's go for the antenna. We had a rooftop antenna. That got us out a little bit further. I said, Chuck, what we need is more power. So I cut the lines to the 9-volt battery and plugged that sucker into the wall. Shot every fuse in the house. Melted my little unit, and it's a wonder I hadn't burned down the house. Oh, Leo Bilbrey was not happy. My daddy. That was my introduction into big-time radio.
Oh, gosh. And Kyle, how did it start for you?
Well, my story is similar to Keith's.
It is.
It's funny to hear you talk about how you were always a nut about radio.
Yeah.
I was too, and there is no earthly reason in my background why I should have been.
But exactly.
But I just loved it, and of course, I knew all about WSM, as I know you did.
Oh, yeah.
We all listened to this station. Anyone who aspired to be on the radio listened to WSM, so I always wanted to work here.
And what area did you grow up in?
I grew up around here.
Okay.
I grew up in the Nashville area, actually out around Joelton. And as a kid, couldn't get enough of listening to the radio, and finally got a job in Murfreesboro, Tennessee in 1980 when I was 18. Started in radio there. The guy who hired me down there, I called him one day. I was in college, and I called him one day, and I said, I'm looking for a job for the summer to learn radio. And he said, well, send me a tape and a resume. Well, I didn't know anything about a tape and a resume, because I'd never worked in radio. So I said, oh, sure, I'll do that. And I listened to the radio and copied down some commercials and a newscast off the air, just writing it down as fast as I could, and then took a portable tape recorder and recorded this tape and sent it to him. And then a couple of weeks later, I called him back to follow up, and he said, "Oh, it's you." And there are several words he said that I'm not able to repeat on the radio.
Oh.
But he said that was the worst tape I have ever heard.
Oh, I'd like to hear
And
that.
I'm thinking, and then he said, "When can you start?"
Welcome to radio, son.
Yeah, his name was Dan James. In case he's listening this morning, and Dan, really, I owe him so much. He's the guy who gave me my first break in radio.
You got to tell the Charlie Chase story about being interviewed by Charlie Chase, because Harold Hensley was the PD and didn't want to do the employment interview. So Charlie Chase, assistant program director, filled in for Kyle.
Well, I think it might have been a little beneath Harold's pay grade to hire part-time announcers, and they needed somebody to work on the weekend, and I had sent, again, a tape and a resume to WSM, and Charlie was very gracious. In fact, when I was working at the other station, and when I got there that day and found a message, "Please call Charlie," I didn't know who it was, because I wasn't expecting a call from Charlie Chase. And so I dialed the number and called Charlie, and I almost fell on my chair when I found out it was Charlie Chase. And we talked a little bit, and he asked me to come up for an interview, and I went to his office for an interview, and I'm sitting on one side of the desk, he's sitting on the other side. I'm nervous as a cat, and Charlie looks across the desk to me, and he said, "Well, I'm looking at your resume here." He said, "Have you ever been arrested?" And I said, "Oh, no, sir, I've never been arrested." And he looked down at the resume again. He said, "Why not?"
Yeah, that feels about right.
And Kelly,
Yeah.
interestingly enough, has worked with both Ralph Emery and Charlie Chase
Yes.
in your television career.
Yeah.
And I think about it now, and I'm like, man, I could not have had two more incredible icons to welcome me into Music City. And Ralph Emery, if you don't learn something from Ralph in the first 10 minutes you're around him, you're not paying
something
attention.
wrong, yeah.
You're missing out.
Absolutely.
That's
I worked
So
with him for 16 years.
I was
on
going to
TV.
say there's a special place in heaven for you, friend, because yes, I love Ralph, but he would if you didn't do what Ralph wanted, he let you know.
Ralph used to, when I would do the weather, I'd say, a chance of showers this afternoon. He says, "Keith, what time is the rain going to move in?" I said, well, afternoon, Ralph, probably early afternoon.
Yeah.
And he would ask me, and I finally just got tired of it. I said, "Ralph, at your house, 2:31."
There you go. That's what he wanted, and he probably loved that.
Yeah, he did.
He
And
Nothing like precision.
one day he called me from the golf course, and I'd called for no rain. And wherever he was, he said, "Keith, I thought you said it wasn't going to rain." I said, Well, it's, what do you mean, Ralph? Well, I'm at the golf course and it's raining.
I want a money back guarantee.
I said, Ralph, it's not raining at my house, so I don't know.
Who hired you in '74, Keith?
Dave Overton. Do you remember Dave Overton?
Certainly.
Yeah, he did the 5 o'clock op. I mean, he was on the Opry, did the Waking Crew. He was an icon. And just to be in his presence, like you say, just scared you to death. But there were so many greats back then, Judd Collins, and you'd walk the hall, and there they'd be.
Well, you know,
And you guys were over on Nob Hill at Channel 4, correct?
radio guys like us, you know, we idolize people like Dave Overton and all of that generation of announcers, because many of them, you know, Otis Devine had been with WSM since the late 30s. You know, Judd Collins had joined WSM in 1940, and Keith and I got to know people like that. In coming up, you know, David Cobb was still coming in and out of the station when I was starting out here. You know, and David had been around forever. It's just it was an amazing group of people to step into.
What was it like to work with Grant Turner?
Oh.
Grant,
I know he was a hero for you, Kyle.
oh sure, yeah.
Oh,
Grant was the
absolutely.
best. I always said that if there was anybody that I wanted to sound like, it would be Grant Turner. Not that I would ever sound like him, because our voices aren't quite the same, but the way he related to his audience. You know, Grant was the kind of guy who on the radio, it felt like he was talking directly to you. Didn't matter, you know, who you were, where you were. He was talking to you. Surely he's talking to me. That's the way I always thought of Grant. And when I got here and got to know him and realized just what a sweet, genuine guy he was, that was just the icing on the cake. It was like, here's this guy that I've listened to and idolized and want to emulate all these years. And he's also a nice guy, because sometimes, you meet a celebrity and sometimes it's not that way.
Yeah.
And but Grant certainly was. I had when I first started at WSM, I had a Sunday afternoon shift, and it consisted of me playing records for 4.5 hours, and then after 4:30 in the afternoon, we would go to tape recorded programming. You know, we'd record NBC's Meet the Press earlier in the day, and it would replay at 4:30, and then we'd have a series of preachers and shows like that. And so I would sit there. I was still a college student, and I would sit there, you know, working on my homework and things like that, and running those tapes, and every 30 minutes coming in and giving a weather forecast and saying, "This is WSM, Nashville, Tennessee." And anyway, Grant, I found out he came in on Sunday afternoon. He had a little recorded show he would do every day. It aired every day. He was mostly retired by then from day-to-day activities. But he would come in on Sunday afternoon and record a week's worth of those shows. And Grant was never in a hurry. And so he found out I was in that studio, and he would come in and sit with me sometimes for hours while those tapes played and just talk and tell stories and things like that. And one of the great regrets of my life is I didn't record more of those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
What a great joy to have that, though.
Yeah, right.
Kyle Cantrell, Keith Bilbrey, Coffee, Country, and Cody, WSM Radio, all our Circle streaming platforms at circlecountry.com.
More Coffee, Country, and Cody is on WSM.
You got Kyle Cantrell, Keith Bilbrey in studio. Kevin Ingram showed up this morning,
How about
too.
that?
He's off camera over there, but
Yeah.
we are celebrating 40 years of WSM Radio in this Magnolia Lobby studio at Gaylord Opryland as we make the transfer to the Acuff house, which also he moved in 1984. Mildred had passed away in 1981. Mr. Acuff eventually transitioned from, wasn't he in Inglewood living over in that
Yeah,
area?
he lived on Moss Rose Drive.
Yeah, you
Okay.
could almost see his house as
I
you look
thought so.
across the river.
And then moved into the Acuff house as we know it, and it's been a lot of things in the year since he passed in 92, I believe. It was the year that Roy passed, and then it's going to be our new state-of-the-art radio and television home.
You know, Kevin Ingram is the reason you got me 20 years ago, because he decided I need to go talk sports with Mark Howard and Frank Wycheck and go on that evil frequency modulation. Right?
Ah, there you go.
Something like that.
So catch us up on what you're doing now, Kevin. Just ease in there if you would.
I work full-time for Vanderbilt now, calling games and doing shows and things over there, so it's a lot of fun, and yeah, it keeps me busy, but this is kind of a slow time of year for us, so it was fun to pop in here and be here for the last day in the studio. I spent some time in the studio, too, and it was always really cool and special and felt like a big honor to be on WSM. And and to work around legends like Kyle and Keith. And I owe a whole lot of my career to Kyle Cantrell. They decided to start a sports position for the morning shows on WSM and WTN back then in 2000. And Kyle decided to plug me in there, and it all went from there. And my first month on the job, I covered 3 NFL playoff games, including the Music City Miracle and Super Bowl. And Super Bowl 34 was week 4, so I got off to a good start.
Nice.
Well, you know,
Talk about timing.
Kevin says, I decided. It wasn't much of a decision, honestly. I mean, he was really great talent, and I'm really proud of you for all the things you've accomplished in your career.
Can I tell one more quick thing?
Yeah.
One of the coolest things I ever did was when they opened the new Country Music Hall of Fame downtown. They had us out, and we could kind of get a sneak preview and walk through it before it actually opened to the public. So I walked through the Country Music Hall of Fame with these guys and Harold Hensley, and it was like taking a trip through country music history to walk through there with those guys and the stories they had. And they had like the mock-up of Owen Bradley's studio, and they were sitting. It was like, yeah, I sat right over there when he signed so-and-so, and it was awesome. And to be on the air with Bill was a huge honor too. I mean, I always say that Bill Cody's the most talented radio dude I've ever known.
Oh, you're so kind, Kevin. Thank you. It's so good to see you.
You've been around a lot of radio.
Yeah, I know, I've been around very many.
That's right.
And that story
so
that
it begins.
Kyle shared about Grant Turner was the way it was for me with Harold Hensley.
Oh, yeah.
I would hang out with him. I'd be here doing different things later in the day for television and have time to kill, and I'd sit in here and we would just have the best time sharing stories off the air.
Well,
I just adored him. And in the break room, I mean, he could just hold an audience like a stand-up comic.
Harold was a huge influence on me too. Don't make any mistakes about that. I remember going to the Ernest Tubb record shop one night after the Opry when Harold was announcing over there, and just standing maybe 5 feet from him, too afraid to introduce myself or to bother him or anything, but just thinking, I can't believe I'm that close to the voice I've heard on the radio coming to me live. You know, I can't believe I'm that close to him. And he was a guy that I also wanted to be a lot like, and to this day love Harold Hensley immensely.
Did you guys have a picture in your mind of what your radio heroes looked like, even though you've never seen? Well, I was that way with Grant Turner. And I remember as a kid, I think I was maybe 12, 10, I don't know. We went to the Grand Ole Opry for the first time at the Ryman. And I had in my mind exactly what Grant Turner looked like. He was tall and had a mustache, and I don't know why. But anyway, the curtain goes up, and there's Grant Turner. And he's kind of stooped over, you know.
You could barely see him over the podium.
Yeah. And I actually got up out of my seat in the balcony and ran down and stood at the base of the podium looking at that. Can't be Grant Turner. Well, it must be Grant Turner.
You sound taller on the radio.
Yeah. And then later I was at Tennessee Tech, and I had an English class, and I was talking to this girl that sat in front of me. And she said, "Aren't you on the radio here in Cookeville?" And I said, "Yes." You know, my head got big. "Oh yeah, I'm Keith Bilbrey." He said, "Well, my dad's in radio." I said, "Oh really? Who is that?" "Grant Turner." It was Nancy Turner. I mean, what's the odds of that?
You've got to tell the story about him training you at the Opry, Kyle. Your first night at the podium.
Oh boy. Well, just to back up just a little bit, Grant and I had met, as I told you earlier, when I first started with the station, and for some reason he just thought I ought to be on the Opry, which I wanted to be, so that was great, you know. But anyhow, it turns out it was 60 years to the day from WSM signing on, an occasion that was lost on me at the time. It was October 5th, 1985, when I first worked on the Opry. And I remember being sent over to the Opry House, and Hal Durham, another WSM
what
icon.
a voice. Oh, what a voice.
Hal was the manager of the Opry, and he said, "Well, go, Kyle, go out and just hang around the announcer's podium, and they'll show you what to do." Well, okay, so I kind of knew what to do, but anyway, I got out there, and Grant was on duty, and it was the Rudy's Farm portion of the Opry, and they used to have this dinner bell, you know, that we had to ring. In fact, it said right in the script, "Announcer ring bell 3 or 4 times."
Ring that bell.
I used to ring that bell. But anyway, Grant was standing there, and he wasn't really into training new announcers, and he didn't quite know what to do. And he said, well, okay, here's the podium. Yeah, it sure is. And he said, and here's your copybook. Okay, yeah, there it is. And here's the microphone. And then he kind of ran out of things to say, and he looked around and he said, and here's the bell. And that was my training as a Grand Ole Opry announcer. And I stood around there that whole Saturday night, and finally at 10 o'clock, I'd been there the whole night. This was, when I first met up with Grant, it was 6:30 or 6:45. 10 o'clock, Hal came up and said, well, Kyle, why don't you take it for a while? So I went on the air at 10 o'clock and introduced Ray Pillow. I remember he was the artist.
Oh, how great.
And the Sunbeam Bread portion of the Opry, and we were on for 15 minutes. And as soon as that was over, Hal came up and said, Kyle, thank you for coming out. We'll see you when we need you. And that was the end of all that. I thought, I stayed around here all night for this 15 minutes,
You got your 15 minutes of fame.
right.
I got my 15 minutes of fame.
And before we leave this morning, and this studio with its history, you walked in, and it was like we were on the same wavelength. You bringing me here in April of 1994, you referred to the safety door as the Vern Gosden Memorial Door.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a perfect close to our visit this morning. Tell what happened.
Well, you have to know a little bit about the psychology of Charlie Douglas. They made him put that door in, included in the plans. Originally, as this studio was conceived, there wasn't a door there. And Charlie didn't like the idea of a door leading outside that, anybody could come up and peck on, while he was on the air. But the fire marshal insisted that there be a door there, which I get it.
Because it's just a solid metal door for people who don't know and can't see.
Right, it had to be fire rated and all that sort of thing. Well, he made them paint the door on the outside in such a nondescript way that, people wouldn't think to come up and come in. There was no marking on it, not even a handle on the door on the outside. And we would give guests who came out here instructions, go to the other door. But Vern Gosden was Charlie's guest one night, and Vern, ignoring the instructions, walked up and did the unthinkable. He knocked on that door. And Charlie thought it was some, hotel guest or something,
right.
and he was infuriated. And he gets up and he stomps over to that door, and he grabs the handle and gives it a shove to open the door very pointedly. And that metal door hit Vern Gosden right here, right in the forehead, and gassed his head open. And poor Vern had to come in here and be on the radio with Charlie, and he sat there with his head bleeding, holding a bandage up to it all night. I'm in here. I'm running the controls for Charlie, so I'm sitting here witnessing all this.
Vern's bleeding out.
Yeah,
nice.
and Vern said, "Son, I'm never coming to that door."
And then went and got sewed up later, right?
Had to go to the hospital afterwards and have a couple of stitches put in.
Taught him a lesson.
So that's what happens when you go to that door.
I can't tell you how my heart just swells with pride knowing both of you and having had both of you in my professional and personal life all these years, and especially this morning after 40 years to say goodbye to the Magnolia Lobby studio.
I'm kind of sad. I hate to see this go.
Yeah.
This is definitely the end of an era. It is a great location for you guys, and but the new place is going to be as well. And I've seen some pictures of it. It looks like it's going to be really nice, and we congratulate you on that. Wish you well.
It's a little brick house on the left as you walk up to the Opry House on the Opry Plaza there. Jerry House tells a great story of one of the security guards coming to him during his stint here at WSM and said, "Why, Jerry, you ain't going to believe it. Some people just opened the door and walked in there the other day. Mr. Acuff was laying in the bed taking a nap, and I walked in on him going through his sock drawer."
Well, I got to ask a question. Are the socks still in the house?
We're going to put them in a frame. They'll be over the side.
In the museum part.
Yeah.
Have you got
that's it.
time for one more quick
Yeah,
one?
sure. Fire away.
I had Buddy Ebsen here one night.
Okay. Jed Clampett, famously.
Jed Clampett, and he had just put out a book about his life, and he was in here, and just a wonderful guy. And people were lined up around these windows. I mean, you couldn't get down the hall. Had to get out of your way. And he was due for a book signing right after his interview. And I thought, okay, let's see how Uncle Jed handles this. And he walked out, and it was the coolest thing I've ever seen. He said, now, folks, I've got to go to a book signing, and I'm already a little bit late. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to post 2 or 3 pictures, and then we got to go. Nobody was unhappy. Nobody complained. And on top of it all that night, I learned how to say, well, doggies. There's a certain way to say it, and you got to get it right.
Keith Bilbrey, Kyle Cantrell, radio royalty in studio this morning on WSM Radio as we bring the 40-year chapter of the Magnolia Lobby Studio to a close. With Kelly Sutton and Charlie Mattos. Kevin Ingram is here with us this morning. Great to see you. I'm Bill Cody. You're on WSM Radio and CircleCountry.com. Tyler Childers' birthday today. He was born in 91. You know what Killer Bees always says about this? All his baby pictures are in color.
Oh, that's kind of funny. I never thought of that.
And all digital, too, I guess, now, right?
Oh. Yeah, he doesn't have any printed ones. They're all on his mom's phone.
That's Kelly Sutton, and what a wonderful time we've had with Keith Bilbrey and Kyle Cantrell and Kevin Ingram, reminiscing the Alumni Club getting together in this historic 40-year studio we know as the Magnolia Lobby Studio and the Magnolia wing of Gaylord Opryland. We have Cascades, the Delta, and the Magnolia. This was the original, though. Mm-hmm. This was when the hotel was first built. This is where he checked in, this is where he checked out. Did your parents stay here, Charlie, when they would come to visit you?
No, because I lived downtown, so they stayed with me or someplace really close where we could just walk to everything. But we'd come out every single trip. There were 2 or 3 things that were the Opry, Opryland, Cracker Barrel, Ralph Emery, Crook and Chase. Those were the 5 things that were on every single visit to Nashville.
I mean, those are not bad things.
No, it made planning really easy because everything was great. Yeah.
I remember the first time I ever hit a Cracker Barrel, it was down here, and I was like, what is this magical place?
I know.
We didn't have those.
No, there were none in New England growing up.
Right,
no, yeah.
right. So that's pretty cool.
And then when you got one, it was where?
In Rentham, Massachusetts. Lori McKenna, the great songwriter, goes to that one, too.
Oh, does
she's
she
still
really?
up there. Yeah, she did a Christmas shop in there one year, she told me. So, yes, 11 miles from my parents' house, to which my dad said, this is too far. We like to eat at places closer to where we live.
We need to stay within the 5-mile radius.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Can't be going this far.
So, Kelly Sutton, in the words of your former colleague, Charlie Chase, have you ever been arrested?
I have not.
Why not?
I will say, in that same vein, when I was getting hired, it wasn't Charlie, but someone else that said, well, I have to tell you, sadly, you passed your drug test, so I'm sorry. And it took a minute for that to sink in, and I was like, oh. And he goes, so apparently you're not having any fun in life, but congratulations. We're glad you're here. So it's been so much fun reminiscing about all of the wonderful things that have happened in this studio. We get to do a few more entertainment reports. I'll tell you about Carly's guitar. Carly has a very cool hummingbird guitar. So the album is called Hummingbird. She's done this with Epiphone. Now she's going to give one away. Look at that thing. Isn't it gorgeous? Mm-hmm. I mean, the hummingbirds on it. It is so pretty. If you want details, she has a contest going right now. You can find it all on her website. So just go to carlypierce.com and find more about the contest. You could go home with a hummingbird guitar. Okay, let's talk about the best advice you've ever been given. So we're telling stories this morning about all the things that have been going on in here. Best advice ever given to Jelly Roll, Lainey Wilson, and Carly Pierce. We'll start with Carly, since we were just talking about her. She said, I feel like the best advice I ever got, my mom told me to always keep my feet on the ground. She said, I feel like a few women have come to mind that have shown me that. That includes Hillary Scott from Lady A, Jeannie Seeley, and Trisha Yearwood. And I was like, yeah, those are some really good
That's
mentors.
a trifecta right there.
Absolutely. Lainey said the best advice, if she could give any advice to her younger self, it would be stay true to yourself. Don't take no for an answer. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. Early bird gets the worm. All of those things. But just be kind and you'll land where you were supposed to land. And I'm like, yeah, that's some great advice. Mm-hmm. And Jelly Roll said the best advice he ever got was just keep writing. It was so cliche and so frustrating, and that's the last thing you really want to hear. But somebody will tell you, just keep writing, man. And what is it that Willie Nelson says, the first 100 that you write don't even count?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So if you want to be a songwriter in this town, or you want to be a singer/songwriter in this town, just keep writing. Keep at it, keep doing it, and keep showing up. up, and all of them have had great success. So I think that is awesome. Okay, one more thing. This is real quick. I'm throwing it out there. Post Malone's doing a show in Nashville. I don't know how we get into this thing. He's already partnered with Bud Light. It's called A Night in Nashville. His album is coming out July 16th. So this is in conjunction with that.
Ooh.
Don't know if it's going to be downtown. I'm not sure how to get in. You can win, though, so it's a contest kind of thing. I'm going to try to score us some tickets because I feel like we'd need to hang out with Post Malone.
Saw a T-shirt the other day, speaking of Lainey Wilson and kindness. It said, kindness is a verb. Think about it.
This is Coffee, Country, and Cody.
Jim Lauderdale. How does it feel to shut down a radio station, young man?
You know, I guess if I had $1 for every radio station I've shut down, I'd be a rich man. But you know, I'm rich with friends.
Oh, we love you. I just told him there were 2 flying insects in here, so if I start swatting, I'm not swatting at him. I'm swatting at the flies that are around.
Well, Jim is here and will certainly be remembered. Yes. But this is the last live studio performance from an artist in this 40-year studio we know as Magnolia before we make that transition. Actually, our transitional studio, you've played it too, which is our production facility at the Wendell Building.
Yes.
You came by there once.
Yeah.
Why were we displaced there, Charlie?
We got flooded.
Oh.
But not the flood, just a flood. Yes. Yes.
And now to the Acuff House we go with a new state-of-the-art facility. Have you ever been in the Acuff House?
I've never been in there.
No kidding. It's been used for rotating exhibits more often than not of late.
Let's see.
Les Levert's photography exhibit is one of the great ones.
And then Famous Friends was over there as well. So
there have been several through the years.
Well, I'm glad that, you know, the interesting thing, and I don't know if they've let you know this, but I'm the last guest today, and with the new studio, I'm going to be the 48, no, maybe we're, 101st.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
We'll get you over there.
Don Schlitz had the best line, because you're going to the Opry. You're at the Opry tomorrow night.
Yes, yeah.
Don Schlitz got a call. This was before Opry membership. He got a call from Gina Keltner when he had just started playing the Opry fairly regularly. And he told Gina one day when she called, he said, "Oh, you finally got to the S's." But it's great to have you. It's appropriate that you are here. I mean, this cat has written famously, successfully for George Strait, Gary Allen, Elvis Costello, Blake Shelton, the Dixie Chicks, Vince Gill, Patti Loveless. I mean, how many of those are in the Hall of Fame that have done the music of Jim Lauderdale? And you've got brand new music as Jim Lauderdale, the artist. My Favorite Place is the new album. You're playing, doing an in-store at Grimey's.
Next Tuesday.
Oh,
yes.
That's 4 o'clock. Okay.
Yeah.
And again, the Opry tomorrow night for Jim.
I'm not sure if Kelly is aware, but we've had a project in development for a long time, and I always like to get updates from Jim when he comes in studio on any news to report on Code E.
Well, let me
and casting.
This is a major motion picture, Kelly.
Yeah.
Code E.
Yes.
Code E. And let me codify a new phrase. You can use no usage fee at all for me. It's yours.
Nice.
Codify this, but the Code E.
And explain to Kelly what it is, first of all.
It is, I will be portraying Bill Cody, who is also an undercover policeman.
Oh.
Like CIA, FBI. Think
so this has all been a ruse. This whole radio TV thing is just...
Well, he fights crime while he's spreading the gospel of country music.
Wow.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I see where this is going.
So where are we as far as getting it picked up? You're still shopping it?
I'm still shopping it, as we say in the film business.
Yeah.
Darn it, I keep getting that close to getting the big money investor. It's going to cost a lot of money.
Right. Yeah.
Speaking of which, look, I've never had to ask you for any kind of, maybe y'all could chip in a little bit, but I'm working so hard
Become a
on
principal
this.
investor.
Today's
Sometimes
today, huh?
I'm having to turn down gigs sometimes.
Right.
And I just, every once in a while, maybe you can just help me out a little bit. And
Executive producer credit, for a certain amount.
That's right.
Yeah.
GoFundMe, Kickstarter. I think that might be our.
Because I
our
think
path.
I've got a meeting actually later today, and I'm going to bring them to the Opry tomorrow night. And
Oh, this will be good.
everything. And
Well,
and I'm,
Kelly could be our showrunner, perhaps.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I like that. I could do that.
You could get it done.
Yeah, for sure.
You could get a meeting.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't say with who, but yeah, I can get you a meeting.
So do you have a history that goes beyond my 30 years here at WSM in this studio coming to WSM?
Yes, I
How
started
far back?
coming here in 1992.
Okay.
And I started, when did you start?
94.
Okay, see? Gosh, that's...
So this is my 30th anniversary year. You've been here now 32 years.
Yeah.
Who would have been a person or persons perhaps in the industry that you met early on that helped you, that you remember?
Two guys that were on here this morning, Keith and Kyle.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was great to hear them on here. And the voice, you guys have great voices, and of course that's why you're doing what you're doing. But you guys have that magic to your voices that, for us listeners, it hits the spot.
It dawned on me yesterday in wrapping up this morning. You know how Charlie Tuna used to sign off every day? Back in the days of the big boss jock voices. He would end his morning show by saying, "Another beautiful voice is next on KHJ."
Nice.
KHJ, Los Angeles, the real Don Steele.
He had an incredible set of pipes, Charlie Tuna. And you can find Aircheck's video on the web on YouTube. I mean, you'll be better for having done it. I'll put it that way. So tell me about this brand new album. How many does this make now, Mr. Lauderdale?
This will be number 37.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, Willie's got 100.
Well, I've got a lot of catching up to do.
Well, let's see. If you
Well,
could
and-
live to 91, maybe you could pull it off.
I'll tell you, though, that Willie keeps making great albums.
Yes, The Border is terrific.
Yeah.
So tell us about Mrs. Green. That's what you wanted us to play first.
Okay. Mrs. Green is a song I wrote with Bob Minner.
Oh,
who
love
plays
Bob.
with Tim McGraw.
Great
And
guitar.
and
Dance
he's-
hall doctor, baby.
He's a great guitar player and great songwriter and wonderful person. And we got together and we started this one and started one that became the title track of a bluegrass record I did last fall with the Poe Ramblin' Boys, and Del McCurry singing on the song. It's called "It's a Long and Lonesome Letting Go." And then Bob Minner and I got back together and cut Mrs. Green, and with my producer Jay Weaver, we went into Blackbird Studios where I've been recording a lot.
That's John McBride's place.
Yes,
Right? Yeah.
and a lot with what they call the Blackbird Academy, which is a school they've got, and I really enjoy working over there with the students, and it keeps things fresh for me to see these young folks coming up, learning how to be engineers, and it has a great energy to it. And so a lot of my most recent records are recorded with those students. Jeremy Cottrell, that mixed a lot of the record too. Jay mixed a couple of things, but he's one of the head instructors. Now, sadly, Mark Rubel, who worked on this record a lot, was an instructor there, passed away several months ago. And but just a great bunch of people, great musicians on this record too.
This is Coffee, Country, and Cody.
Jim Lauderdale is here. New music. We featured Mrs. Green just before the break. We got a brand new album, My Favorite Place. And one of the best album cover photographs you will ever see is on this album. Grace is the cover of this album.
Thank you.
And the Game Changers, does your road band, touring band play on the album as well?
They do.
Well, recognize
With
them if you
some extra guests, too. But Jay Weaver, producer on bass, Lily Mae Rishi on vocals and fiddle, Frank Rishi, Lily Mae's brother, on guitar and vocals, Craig Smith, Lily Mae's husband, on guitar, and Dave Racine. And then we've supplemented that with Will Van Horn on piano, Catherine Marks on piano.
Whom we know at the Grand Ole Opry. She's married to our musical director, Carrie Marks.
Yeah.
She's still out touring with Rodney?
I'm not sure.
She was on that tour, I know,
She
for a
did
while.
a session with me about a month ago, and I forgot to ask her about that. Let's see, Will Van Horn on pedal steel.
I saw Steve Henson's
Steve
name.
Henson on pedal steel, and Tommy Dedamore on pedal steel. A bunch of great. Let's see, of course, Chris Scruggs and Kenny Vaughn are on guitar. On
Cousin Kenny and
too.
Professor Scruggs.
Yeah.
Of the Fabulous Superlatives. What you want to play live for us first? I'll get you to do a couple.
I'll do another song, and I'll back up from the mic because I'll sing loud.
You're going to belt it.
But this one is, to put things in context, 45 years ago, I lived in Nashville for several months, and one of my dreams was to be on the Grand Ole Opry. And it took several years later, but at the time, I was thinking, man, I'm a loser. This ain't going to happen. But sometimes those things that happen in life that we want to achieve don't happen at the time, end up being better in the long run for you. Like, I'm so glad now that tomorrow I'll be on the Opry and that I'm here with y'all. And that's something 45 years ago I didn't think was going to happen.
And when did you play the Opry the first time, Jim?
I believe that was 1999. Ralph Stanley brought me on as a guest.
How about that?
And so I've been playing ever since and just love it. It's so important and special for me.
And you worked with him up nearly to the end
Yeah.
of his life, didn't you?
Yeah, that was. He was.
You brought. I don't know who brought whom, but I remember you guys being in the studio together with us one morning.
Oh, wow.
And he passed not long after.
Yeah. I remember the first time I saw you live was at the Ryman with George Jones. And I don't know if you had done a whole tour, if that was just the one spot there, but it was a phenomenal show. It's the only time I ever saw George Jones.
He was incredible. He was, you know.
And then you portrayed him at the Ryman.
Him in a play. Yeah, at the Ryman. So, see, sometimes these things, and this is for you folks listening out there, when things don't happen at first that you want to happen, just keep at it. And,
You'll Be Gone by Then. It's from My Favorite Place, Jim Lauderdale's brand new album. And off to the Grand Ole Opry tomorrow night on the 25th. You'll be at Grimey's, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I think you and the Poe Ramblin' Boys are doing Romp up in Owensboro, Kentucky on the 27th. So the days ahead.
I'll be out with the Game Changers for dates, too, and I'll be Larry Gatlining it solo several dates, too. When I first heard Larry Gatlin, he was opening up for the Earl Scruggs Review
how
in
about
Atlanta, and I was so taken with him, what he could do just with him and a guitar. And, but thank y'all again so much. I really appreciate y'all.
Making history in the Magnolia Lobby studio. Our last in-studio guest before our transition to the Roy Acuff house, which will be our new state-of-the-art radio and television home, Jim Lauderdale. Thanks, pal.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great show tomorrow night at the Opry. WSM Radio, all our Circle streaming platform. Watch us, circlecountry.com. So many artists. I was just running it down. You Wreck Me is the final cut on the 20-cut album, and George Strait, it's a George Strait live version of it. And that was, of course, American Girl, one of the most famous Tom Petty catalog songs. And Dirk Bentley doing it.
It was either the opening or closing song of every Tom Petty show I ever saw. And I saw him more in concert than any artist I have. So,
Really?
Yeah.
How many times?
14. If you count Mudcrutch at the Ryman, 14.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and he's my very first concert, too. August 8th, 1991.
Gosh, I don't know.
Opry Dan's birthday.
I was trying to think of how many times I've seen John Mayer is probably the one that I've paid to see the most.
Right.
I would think. I mean, it's probably like 8, maybe 7, 8.
Petty Country, a country music celebration of Tom Petty. It starts with Chris Stapleton and ends with George Strait, and just about everybody you know and love in country music is squeezed in between on the other 18 tracks. But again, there's a live version of You Wreck Me that closes it from George Strait, which is kind of interesting.
That is cool.
Yeah.
I never would have put those sounds together with George and that song.
Remember
That's
when
cool.
George and Frank Sinatra on his box set, that's the only place you can get it, did Fly Me to the Moon?
No.
Yeah. They weren't
But I could
together
see that.
when they recorded. They weren't
Yeah.
together, but yeah.
I could see that
Hey,
happening.
Francis, let's take a little trip.
He's got
actually
that suave to him,
a little
sure.
spoken word thing from George, which is
Yeah.
unusual
I like it.
because he doesn't speak; he just sings to tens of thousands of teeming fans.
111,000, nearly.
It was
110.
110,904.
904. Could they not get a few more in there
I
to
got so
squeeze
tickled.
them?
There's a picture somewhere on socials
I got a feeling that was squeezed.
That was probably squeezed, yeah.
that somebody apparently just wrote on a piece of paper, like a sticky note,
Yeah.
Post-it note, and it's blue, and he's holding it up, and Norma's just like standing in the background. He's just holding up this little piece of paper with 110,904 written.
That has it on there. That's nice.
I thought, yeah, I can just see him now. I go, so how we do tonight? And they just handed him a piece of paper with a number on it.
It's like, oh,
that's a
okay.
standard procedure at the end of each
Sure.
show.
Just keeps all the sticky notes. They're on a wall
For
somewhere
those
in
of
the
you
house.
who don't know what we're talking about, it was the King at Kyle, Texas A&M Kyle Field
Yeah.
show that was a record setter for George Strait, and Katie Offerman and Parker McCullum got the opportunity to open for him.
What a cool night. What a cool night. Well, I just saw this and I wanted to make sure that we mentioned it since we're doing some entertainment headlines. Donald Sutherland had passed away.
Yeah.
88 years old. I mean, we know him from a multitude of things, but most recently, and how my daughter's generation will remember him, he was President Snow in the Hunger Games. And the Hunger Games have been making a lot of their, revival now because they've had some new ones that have been added to it. So definitely been remembered at The Dirty Dozen. He was in MASH, the movie. Just so many things. Citizen X, he won an Supporting Actor Emmy Award for that in 95. So definitely. And Kiefer's dad. Kiefer Sutherland's
He was the
dad.
doped up tank driver in Dirty Dozen, if you remember, with Lee Marvin. And he had this great line, and we went around using it at school all the time when that movie came out. So, there you go, man, with them negative waves. Always them negative waves.
Don't be bringing that up in here. But 88 years old, remarkable career. So we asked some of our favorites, best piece of advice you've ever been given. And I feel like these are just amazing answers. First up, Jelly Roll. He said best piece of advice he had been given. It came early in his career and somebody told him, just keep writing. And it was so cliche and so frustrating. And the last thing I really wanted to hear, you play somebody a song and they're like, that's great, man, keep writing. But he said it really did make a difference. And of course, it's now led him to so many songs that we're playing all over the radio and huge success. So Jelly Roll says, just keep writing. Okay, to Lainey Wilson, she said, if I had to give advice to my younger self, it would be stay true to yourself. Don't take no for an answer, squeaky wheel gets the grease, all of that stuff, but also stay true to who you are. Don't try to be who they want you to be. And absolutely. And she also said, and maybe hang tight, honey. That would be the last one. Well done, Lainey.
Promote the new single.
Get that new single in there, honey. That's right. Okay, last but not least, Carly says, best piece of advice I ever had came from my mom. I feel like my mom told me to always keep my feet on the ground. And a few women have come to mind that show me that. and that includes Hillary Scott from Lady A, Jeannie Seeley, and Trisha Yearwood. So even though you have all these wonderful things happening to you, just remember who you are and where you came from. You're from Kentucky, kid. Don't forget about it. Also, CMA Fest special. It's going to be happening. You can watch it on the 25th and then the next day on Hulu. So if you missed out on anything CMA Fest, that is your chance to get all of the highlights. Nashville is getting a Post Malone show. Where? Don't know. When?
Wait a minute.
Not sure.
Wait.
Yeah.
We're getting a show, but we don't know where to go.
Listen, this is how he
I am
operates.
listening.
This is how he operates. He's partnered with Bud Light. You obviously probably have to drink some to get in, but he is going to be doing a release. This is before his album comes out. His album comes out July 16th, so we know that's going to be happening. If you want more information and how to win tickets in, you have to do a night in Nashville. You message a night in Nashville to Bud Light on Instagram or Facebook, which is bizarre because I don't follow Bud Light.
The last time they did a similar thing, they did 6 shows around the country as part of their Bud Light summer pop-up series. We got One Republic here, and it was at Skydeck downtown. And our friend Lindsay L got to open that show.
Love One Republic.
Yeah, it was
so much.
It was a phenomenal.
I remember
night of
that
music.
night. I was
Yes.
super jealous that
Yes.
you were then
Thank
in
you.
on that.
Yeah.
Okay, one more story.
And good for me.
Speaking of Lainey Wilson, she has a song on what I think is going to be one of my favorite soundtracks from any movie, Twisters with an S. So this is the follow-up to Twister. She has a song on it. Ooh, I am already in love with that. We've got so many of our favorites on the soundtrack. Luke Combs, Miranda Lambert, Thomas Rhett. Who else is on here? Tyler Childers, Tucker Wetmore, new guy that we love, Shania Twain. So check it out. It comes out July 19th.